shockwaves heard around the National Football League as the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick have agreed to part ways, and why Bill Belichick just might wind up in the AFC West. It's orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. We've got the Commanders saying they're not interested in Belichick. We've got the Titans saying they're not interested in Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think the Raiders or the Chargers might be his landing spot.
Yeah, and the other team I would throw in there would be the Atlanta Falcons, and there's a little bit of a history there with Arthur Blank wanting some big swings at coaches. You go back a couple of decades, Arthur Blank was very interested in getting Joe Gibbs, Hall of Famer from Washington, to replace Dan Reeves after the '03 season, and ultimately Gibbs went back to Washington when part of it was a little bit of pressure coming on from the Falcons, and then Dan Snyder made the move to bring Gibbs back to Washington, where he guided that franchise to 2 playoff appearances in 4 years. History shows that was very successful for a coach under Dan Snyder. So I'd keep an eye on Atlanta, although the AFC West is intriguing, and the Chargers offer the best quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually doesn't go to the AFC West when all is said and done.
Yeah, when all is said and done, it's there. And Mace, I'll just say in general terms, overarching for all the teams that have openings, aren't the Chargers the best landing spot because of Herbert? Maybe the ownership who may not want to pay you as much, although a guy like Belichick's going to command a certain salary. They also need a GM. I know Belichick, the report said he would be willing to give up things, but also other reports said that was in process to get rid of him months ago, which I agree with. But aren't the Chargers, because of the quarterback in a quarterback desperate league, the best landing spot? And Belichick hasn't been the same without Tom Brady. You know what? Herbert would get a lot of credit if they win and win Super Bowls, but Belichick will know in this league you need a QB.
Yeah, the last few years have shown that. I mean, there was a brief moment in 2021 where they thought they'd hit with Mac Jones. Remember, the Patriots did go to the postseason in 2021 and then got destroyed by Buffalo in the wild card round, which I think showed some of the limitations of what you could do with Mac Jones at quarterback. So I think Bill Belichick understood always the need for a quarterback. It's just that he's taken some swings and misses, right? Cam Newton was an interesting move in 2020, the COVID year for the Patriots. Of course, if you were following the Broncos that year, you saw Cam Newton with the Patriots against the Broncos. By the way, the only time in 4 games the Broncos played against the Patriots with Belichick as coach without Brady, that was the only one the Broncos won. Very interesting. There was a higher winning percentage for Belichick and the Patriots without Brady than against the Broncos than with Brady. Fun fact there for you. But yeah, the thing is, I knew Cam Newton wasn't going to work out. It's not because Cam wasn't good enough at one point. He just, the spirit was willing, the mind was willing, the body was weak.
Right.
That's what doomed him toward the end in Carolina. It was all about the hits that he took, and he physically was breaking down. And then Mac Jones, that was sort of the test of, okay, forget about arm talent. Just can you get a guy to kind of hit his marks and succeed in the scheme? It worked. It worked the year they had Josh McDaniels. As maligned as Josh McDaniels is as a head coach, he's a very good assistant, a very good quarterback nurturer. And then, of course, when Belichick tried the unorthodox approach of having Matt Patricia involved with offensive play calling in 2022.
And
with
Joe
a young
Judge,
quarterback.
right? Wasn't Joe Judge there doing something? They didn't
Yeah,
name one, but they had both, and you didn't know what was going on.
You had 2 ex-head coaches who weren't offensive coaches with a young quarterback. If anything, maybe there was a little bit of intellectual arrogance on the part of Bill Belichick and how he attacked the 2022 season. And that didn't do any favors for Mac Jones, even though, yes, has his limitations as a quarterback. And now the Patriots find themselves in a QB needy spot, and Belichick may find himself looking for a team that has that QB, which would be the Chargers, much more so than the Raiders or the Atlanta Falcons. But I'm going to offer you this, though.
Okay.
How does this move today affect the landscape of the Broncos potentially drafting a quarterback this year? Because I would say that this is another team that is more likely to pick a quarterback now, and the New England Patriots probably going earnestly into a rebuild
Yep.
rather than. I think if Belichick had stayed there, believe it or not, Russell Wilson, I think, would have been in play for the Patriots as a potential veteran to come in and clean things up a bit. Now this puts the Patriots firmly in that pool of teams seeking a young quarterback. Arizona looks more like they're going to hone in on Marvin Harrison Jr. with their high pick to complement with Kyler Murray. Chicago, that's reading the tea leaves right now. I mean, who knows
I
what
have
might
heard,
what might
and
happen
it'll
there.
change when we get on the road, Mason. I'll talk to more people, but in early swipes, you know what I've heard?
Yeah.
They're going to keep Fields and still draft a quarterback.
Mm,
They changed the
wild.
entire offensive staff except for Eberfluss. Like, hey, we're going to keep you. You've got to fire everybody. But this certainly has ramifications. Not only if Belichick lands in the AFC West, that's a conversation we're having today, but also, as you mentioned, it's just going to be more quarterback crazy in the draft.
Mm-hmm. This really means the Broncos probably are dealing from the Penix Nix McCarthy deck,
Unless they move up.
unless they move up. But if teams want quarterbacks up at the top, they're not going to want to move down, right?
Right.
At almost any price.
Right.
That's the thing to consider here.
Yeah, and this rich quarterback class, that's going to be a thing. Now, let's say Belichick goes to the Raiders. We'll be pretty certain Josh McDaniels isn't going to go with him as an OC. If he goes to the Chargers, maybe McDaniels is OC running Herbert. That's interesting. But you mentioned Russell Wilson. So I'm going to play that what-if scenario. What if Belichick goes to the Raiders, looks at Aiden O'Connell, sees him as a Bailey Zappi, and says, let's go get Russell Wilson. So you see Russell Wilson in a Raiders jersey with Bill Belichick as his coach. Spicy.
That is extremely spicy. Oh my goodness.
But I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. We're dealing with Belichick, who has an affinity for a guy like Russell Wilson.
Yeah, but Belichick also has an affinity for quarterbacks who are more consistent in their production, whereas Russell Wilson, it's about going with the highs and the lows, right? You looked at the first Broncos game with Jarrett Stidham starting. I thought it was very significant statistically in that game. The Broncos didn't go 3 and out at all. The only drive they had without a first down was when they were in victory formation at the end of the game. So thus, it was an offensive performance that didn't really have a lot of peaks, but also didn't have the valleys. It was more like this. And Bill Belichick with Tom Brady, obviously spoiled, he was at a high level, but it was a consistent high level, right? So Russell Wilson, it's fun to talk about. It may not be the best stylistic marriage there if it comes to pass. But Belichick wants to win. He's 71 years old. This does not appear to be somebody who is going to take a swing at developing a quarterback. And actually, if we're talking about it, the spicy thing would be the Raiders. Atlanta, even though, again, Russell Wilson isn't consistent like some of the other quarterback possibilities, if Belichick goes to Atlanta, then Russell Wilson may really be in play there because that appears to be a roster that may well be a quarterback away from winning the division for the next 3 years. It's there for the taking. The last 2 NFC South winners went 8-9 and 9-8, both Tampa Bay. Atlanta 7-10 with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. If you're Bill Belichick, you look at that roster.
Nothing but weapons. All weapons. Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. You need someone who can distribute. The problem is Russell Wilson that right distributor? Or, I mean, I'll throw a name out there, even though there's not a connection. If the Vikings move on from Kirk Cousins, he might make sense with Bill Belichick in Atlanta. It's pretty wide open. If I'm sitting here today, I think if I were ranking the jobs for Bill Belichick of the 3 that we've discussed, I would rank them in order. Chargers just because you have Justin Herbert. And I think the Spanos family ownership is so desperate right now that they will just get out of the way and give Belichick whatever.
Right. Right.
Historically cheap. We know this. But desperate at this point. There's a lawsuit regarding the family, an inter-family squabble, a lawsuit regarding ownership in place. So the clock may well be ticking on Dean Spanos and this family business, which has Spanoses all over the organization.
Right.
They may be willing to just roll the dice and do the desperate gambit here of bringing in Belichick, partnering him with Herbert. And this would it would be desperate, but it also may be the best situation, even though the Chargers are in cap hell. The best overall roster, though, of these three teams does belong to the Atlanta Falcons. And probably the best situation for contention belongs to the Atlanta Falcons because of the teams that are around them in the NFC South. There's not, Tampa Bay is pretty decent, but again, they're 9-8. They're very happy with where they are because, frankly, the Bucs expect to go 5-12 this year, right?
And they don't have a quarterback under contract next year because Baker's going to be a free agent. So that's a large question. If you're Belichick, you see that as very attractive. Arthur Blank, respected, and the Spanos family. It's so weird they fired Tom Telesco because he's their son-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, wow, I never thought that would happen. But you mentioned desperate and cheap. I'll say this: isn't it a bargain if you're paying for your coach and your GM together? Because he's the same guy.
Yes. Yeah, what you would basically say is, okay, Bill, who's your number two? Because you're gonna want to have someone that you trust there. Dave Ziegler, who was with Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas, is he in play to go wherever Belichick goes? Another interesting one, although I think there's less of a chance of this because their front office is much more settled in. We've seen some shock moves. Pete Carroll was a shock move.
Right.
Todd Bowles was thought to be on the hot seat for most of this season in Tampa Bay. Okay. And the Glazer family, who owns the Buccaneers, that's a big swing ownership group. Look at what they did with Tom Brady. Wouldn't that be something if they lose on Monday night to Philadelphia? Mm-hmm. And again, hey, they fired Tony Dungy after a playoff season. They fired John Gruden after going 9-7, right? Again, their MO is they'll sometimes say good is not good enough. Do they take a swing? And then Bill Belichick makes the call on Baker Mayfield, and frankly, the best call may be the one within the house. I don't know if you're going to do appreciably better than Baker Mayfield going into this cycle.
Right.
But it's very telling that Baker Mayfield, there hasn't been a contract done yet, which maybe tells me, do they not yet have the person who's going to help make that decision coming in? Again, I got a tinfoil hat on here, but it's very interesting to kind of look at the landscape here.
It's just critical thinking and a keen awareness of one's surroundings, and that surrounding is a guy like Belichick becomes available. Look what happened with Mike Vrabel. I know we're not talking about Vrabel today, but look at that situation and the bad ownership of Tennessee to move on from a really respected coach who I'd just go to Alabama if I was Vrabel. But now Vrabel's, you scrap everything. And Mike Mularkey, speaking of Tennessee, got fired after winning a playoff game. So, could Todd Bowles get removed? And I think they do beat the Eagles, by the way. But
by the way,
could Todd Bowles get removed? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think they beat the Eagles as well because the Eagles look right now, it's what you are at this point. The Eagles look like a bad football team today. The Bucs look like a much better football team than the Eagles. It's not about the records, it's what you are right now. It's like Miami, they're going out to Kansas City. They're 11-6. You say, oh, they're going to put up a good fight. Look how battered that Miami roster is right now.
Right.
Miami's not in a position to go and be at their best in Arrowhead Stadium because they have so many injuries, because they're down to backups at the edges. Right now, Philadelphia looks to be in absolute chaos, and the Bucs, even though they did not play their best football in the final 2 weeks, they were lucky enough to get Carolina in week 18. They were playing good football before then, so you'd kind of take the Bucs run of form right now over the Eagles, even though the Bucs run of form isn't great. It's weird. Like it's kind of weird to think that two of the teams that are skidding a bit going into playoffs are actually going to play each other. Whereas you look at you look at some other matchups. You look at like Houston and Cleveland, for example, and you have two teams that appear to be peaking as they go into the playoffs, right?
Right.
And one of them is going to be out by the end of Saturday. But this is, the landscape may actually look different on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week for Bill Belichick to decide where he wants to go. I mean, I'll give you another one. Okay. New Orleans, there was a confab between Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen. Some of the stuff going down about an apparent disconnect between Dennis Allen and the players, with Jameis Winston, the backup quarterback, going in and saying, screw a kneel down, we're going to score here, right? At the end of that game against the Falcons on Sunday. If you're Gail Benson running that team, if you're Mickey Loomis, the GM, are you not thinking, interesting? I mean,
let me give you
especially
another
because
one.
we made it work with Sean Payton all these years, and Sean Payton and Bill Belichick are very much alike in how they attack things.
Let me give you another one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers deserve to be in the postseason, but if they beat Buffalo, Sean McDermott. And if you're Bill Belichick, what's better than staying in the AFC East and sticking it to New England twice a year with Josh Allen winning 6 Super Bowls like Brady did? I mean, Sean McDermott is not safe whatsoever. And win or lose.
Have you heard the rumors floating around today?
Which ones?
About the playoff game, that Steelers-Bills game on Sunday.
Okay.
That the weather conditions
25-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, and snow and more so the conditions involved with people getting to the stadium, right?
Okay.
And that, if you're familiar with that part of the Buffalo area, Orchard Park is south of downtown Buffalo. Thus, it is right in the heart of the real snow belt. Like the snowstorms that hit, they're very localized in the Buffalo area. Downtown Buffalo might get 4 inches, and Orchard Park might get 3 feet. That's been known to happen. So we've seen over the years games get moved from Buffalo elsewhere. A thing that's been floating around today are rumblings that they could move that game to Cleveland, which is actually closer to Pittsburgh than it is to Buffalo. Steelers Nation would probably try to take over First Energy Stadium in Cleveland if they play that game. So imagine that scenario with potentially the Steelers having a quasi home game.
Right.
I mean, that, and yes, I have heard that out there too, that McDermott, the seat was getting really toasty there after the Broncos went in and stole that game on Monday Night Football back on November the 13th.
Yep, and it got toastier after the report about all of his stuff behind the scenes.
The bizarre...
Was it Tyler Dunn that had that, right?
The bizarre motivational speech.
Yes.
Talking about, like, unity of purpose by citing the 9/11 hijackers. My God, man, what are you doing?
Right.
No.
Right.
There are certain things you don't bring up, right?
Yeah, so McDermott's on the hot seat.
Yeah. And Bill Belichick, I mean, wouldn't that be something? That would, gosh, if you can't beat him, hire him. And until the last few years, the Buffalo Bills could not beat the New England Patriots. And the thought may be, oh boy, if you gave Bill Josh Allen, that would be something.
Look out. What does it mean?
Yeah. Go ahead, and if Bill wants any little revenge on New England, he'd love to stay in the AFC East. That would be something.
Oh, yeah. Get him twice a year. What does it mean to coach where it means something? Let's play this clip from Sean Payton. You loved it when we talked about it earlier. Mm-hmm. So here's the Broncos coach at the season-ending presser talking about a question I believe is about New Orleans, but talking about how much it means in Denver. And let's listen to Coach and then talk about how that may reflect to Belichick and a place like Buffalo.
But I think I would say this. It's important, obviously, to our fan base and in a smaller level, but still significant way. It's very important, those people back there. And that's an attraction. I mean, coaching somewhere where it really matters a lot, I think is important, and I just think that that was an attraction here.
It just means more, to use the old phrase that they would throw on SEC broadcasts, right, for football. It just means it means more in Buffalo. It means more in Denver, right?
Yes.
And all of you who are watching this show understand it. There are some places it means more. It means more in Green Bay, right? Look, there are certain places it just means more than Los Angeles with the Chargers.
Right. And even Las Vegas with the Raiders.
Yes. I think Las Vegas can get there someday.
Right.
You and I have talked about that market. I'd say it probably to some degree it already is there on the hockey side with the Golden Knights, as far as that being a place where it really does mean
they're crazy.
One whole heck of a lot. Yeah, they're crazy about their Knights. They really are. Atlanta's interesting because Atlanta's a football town, but not a pro football town. Atlanta's a college football town. If we're talking about the Falcons, right?
Right.
And I would actually argue that the algorithm in Atlanta goes SEC football, Atlanta Braves baseball, then the Falcons. And I'd say I know what I'm speaking of when it comes to this. But yeah, there are certain places. I mean, you look around the landscape. Buffalo's one, and then a lot of places where the jobs aren't available, like Chicago. Looks like they're going to stay with Eberflus. Although when if Belichick wanted to go to some place where it meant more, Chicago's a place where it means more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another place where it means more, although I think the antenna is pointing in another direction, is Seattle.
Very much so. Very much so. I think it's Dan Quinn there.
I think it's Dan Quinn as well, but that's a place where you get that sort of enthusiasm and investment. Funny thing is, for a long time, New England wasn't one of those places with football. It is now.
Right.
It's now because of Belichick and Brady. Bill Belichick played a huge role in taking Boston and New England from a place where it was Red Sox first, and then probably the Celtics kind of settling in, to where the Patriots were right there on that top level. Yes. And they still are, even as they've struggled. That's the power of one person. But it's the allure of Belichick, that Belichick may feel to say, okay, I did this in New England. What if I could do it in Atlanta? Right?
Right.
What if I could do it in LA with the Chargers? I think it's more likely he could do it in Atlanta than he could in LA, to be honest with you.
Right.
Just the Chargers have to fight being the number 2 team by a long shot in their own market in football, right?
Right.
So the challenge would be greater there. But that's where the Raiders could intrigue. And the Raiders and that's another thing. Raiders have history as well. It hasn't been great for a long time. But when you talk about franchises that have
mystique.
that have there's a mystique about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Broncos were successful for a long time, but respectfully, I don't think the mystique is with them as it is with like the Raiders and the Packers and the Cowboys, right?
Right. Steelers, that type of franchise.
Mm-hmm. But it does mean a lot. I'd say Denver's kind of more like Denver and Buffalo and Seattle are kind of in that next tier where they don't necessarily have the mystique, but it has the meaning. Right.
Well, it's history too, right? Teams
San
you mentioned been around for a
one.
long time.
Yeah, I'd throw San Francisco in there as well as another that's kind of where it's you have the history. Philadelphia is another one they don't have the mystique, but they have the passion and they have lineage as well. So this is, I mean, it's really fascinating to think what Belichick might consider for his next chapter. One thing I did write about DenverSports.com. An early part foundationally for him was in Denver, because in 1978, his official title was Director of Films, which, given decades later Spygate, very interesting. But he also helped out on the defensive and special teams sides coaching wise, which actually did help lead to the special teams job he got the following year under Ray Perkins with the New York Giants in 1979. But he talked a few weeks ago before the Bronco game, and you can read this at denversports.com, about the impact of the 1978 season, the impact of working with Joe Collier, the architect of the Orange Crush defense, and what he learned specifically about the 3-4 alignment. Because Bill Belichick, for most of his career since then, has been a pretty stout 3-4 guy, tactically speaking, as a defensive coach. Really, that came from Joe Collier. That's part of the legacy of the Orange Crush, is what we've seen in Belichick's defenses over the decades. Really fascinating to think about.
Right. It's fascinating to figure out where Bill Belichick's going to go and how just him leaving New England impacts the Denver Broncos. It's Orange and Blue today. We want to help grow our YouTube channel, so help us out by doing the YouTube things like,
comment, share,
subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching. Stay tuned